Boss replaced me with his daughter. 2 weeks later, the biggest client asked for me by name. Their panic when I arrived at the meeting with my new company epic comeuppance. I was sitting at my desk organizing the final details for our biggest account presentation when my boss, Victor, walked in with a young woman I'd never seen before. "Morgan, meet Zoe, my daughter. She'll be taking over your account starting today." Just like that, after 6 years of building client relationships and exceeding every sales target, I was being pushed aside without warning or explanation. What happened in the next 2 weeks would not only change my career trajectory, but completely transform the power dynamics of the entire firm. The morning had started like any other Monday at Prescott Media Solutions. I'd arrived early to prepare for the Atwood Industries presentation, a potential $5 million account that I'd been courting for months. This wasn't just another client. Landing Atwood would mean reaching my annual target by the second quarter, and solidifying my position for the promotion I'd been working toward since joining the company. I just finished my third cup of coffee, when Victor's distinctive knock sounded at my office door. Victor Prescott was old-school Madison Avenue, right down to his tailored suits and vintage tie clips. He'd built Prescott Media from a one-room operation to one of the most respected boutique agencies in Chicago, and he expected nothing less than perfection from his team. "Morning, Morgan," he said, stepping inside without waiting for a response. The young woman who followed him was impeccably dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "I'd like you to meet Zoe, my daughter. She just finished her MBA at Wharton." I stood and extended my hand, professional smile firmly in place despite the unexpected intrusion. "Nice to meet you, Zoe." I didn't realize Victor had a daughter in the industry. "Dad likes to keep his work and family lives separate," Zoe replied, her handshake deliberately firm, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I immediately recognized the subtle power play and matched her grip strength exactly. 6 years in a male-dominated industry had taught me when to yield and when to hold my ground. Victor seemed oblivious to the silent sizing up happening between us. "Zoe's joining our executive team, and I want her to take over your accounts effective immediately. You'll transfer all your client files and brief her on ongoing projects by end of day." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "All my accounts, including Atwood?" "I've been working on that presentation for months, and the meeting is this Friday." "Especially Atwood," Victor replied, his tone making it clear this wasn't up for discussion. "Zoe has some fresh ideas that align perfectly with what they're looking for. But I've built the entire strategy based on my conversations with their CMO, and you'll brief Zoe on all of that." Victor interrupted. "You're being reassigned to our legacy accounts. Janet will email you the details this afternoon." Legacy accounts. The industry euphemism for clients who barely spent money but required constant hand-holding. Accounts no one wanted because they offered minimal commission and maximum frustration. This wasn't a reassignment, it was a demotion wrapped in corporate pleasantries. "I see," I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "And may I ask why?" "My performance reviews have been excellent, and I've increased my portfolio's revenue by 32% this year alone." Victor's expression hardened slightly. "This isn't a reflection on your performance, Morgan. It's a strategic realignment. Zoe brings valuable connections and a fresh perspective that I believe will take these accounts to the next level." Translation. Zoe was family, and I wasn't. After they left, I sat motionless at my desk, trying to process what had just happened. 6 years of late nights, working weekends, sacrificing my personal life to build client relationships, all of it erased in a 5-minute conversation. The promotion I'd been promised was now clearly going to the boss's daughter regardless of her qualifications or experience. My phone buzzed with a text from Elise, our creative director, and my closest ally at Prescott. "Just heard conference, room C in 10 minutes, bringing coffee." Elise was waiting with 2 large cups from the expensive place across the street. At 45, she'd survived 3 decades in advertising and had the battle scars to prove it. Unlike many women who'd made it to leadership positions, she hadn't pulled up the ladder behind her. Instead, she'd become a mentor to younger women like me. "So," she said, sliding a cup toward me, "the prodigal daughter returns." I nearly choked. "Returns? You knew about her?" "Zoe interned here about 7 years ago, right before you joined. It didn't go well." Elise took a sip of her coffee. She expected special treatment. Clients didn't respect her, and Victor eventually sent her to business school instead of fast-tracking her into management like she wanted. "And now she's back with an MBA and a direct line to the corner office," I said bitterly. "With something to prove," Elise corrected. "And using your client list to do it." I stared into my coffee. I don't understand why Victor would do this. I've made him a fortune. The Lockhart campaign last year alone brought in enough to cover the office renovation he was so proud of. Elise leaned forward. Family businesses are complicated, Morgan. Victor's been under pressure from his ex-wife, Zoe's mother. The divorce settlement included a clause about Zoe eventually taking a leadership role in the company. This has been coming for years. So I'm just collateral damage in a family drama? That's not fair. No, it's not, Elise agreed. But fairness doesn't drive decisions in corner offices. Power does. I spent the rest of the morning assembling client files and trying to maintain my composure as colleagues stopped by, having heard the news through the office grapevine. Their expressions ranged from genuine sympathy to poorly disguised satisfaction. I'd made my share of rivals on my way up. By lunchtime, Janet from HR had emailed my new portfolio. 15 legacy clients, most barely active, collectively worth less than one of my previous mid-tier accounts. The message was clear. I was being sidelined into irrelevance. As I organized the Atwood presentation materials for handover, Zoe appeared in my doorway. I thought we could go through the Atwood brief now, she said, not bothering to ask if I was available. For the next 2 hours, I walked her through 6 months of work, the market research, competitive analysis, creative concepts, and media strategy I developed. I explained Atwood's unique challenges, their conservative CMO's preferences, and the subtle politics between their marketing and product teams that had to be navigated carefully. Zoe took minimal notes, interrupting occasionally with questions that revealed her inexperience despite her prestigious degree. This strategy seems very safe, she commented, flipping through the presentation deck. Shouldn't we be pushing them toward more disruptive approaches? That's what we learned at Wharton. James Atwood is a third-generation CEO who personally signs off on marketing decisions, I explained, trying to keep the frustration from my voice. He doesn't respond well to what he calls marketing gimmicks. Trust me. I've tested those waters. Well, perhaps he just hasn't had the right person presenting those ideas, Zoe replied with the confidence of someone who'd never had a client reject a proposal. I'm making some changes to your presentation. More digital, less traditional media, more aggressive messaging. I bit my tongue. It's your presentation now. I've outlined what's worked with them in the past, but you should certainly make it your own. Her smile was thin. That's exactly what I intend to do. By the end of the day, I'd transferred all my files, sent introduction emails to my former clients explaining the exciting transition, as Victor had instructed me to phrase it, and cleaned out the personal items from my prime office near Eeyore, the creative department. My new office was on the lower floor, half the size, with a view of the parking garage instead of the Chicago skyline. As I placed my plants on the windowsill, trying to brighten the depressing space, my phone rang. It was Caroline from Lockhart Industries, one of my biggest former clients. Morgan, what's this email about you no longer handling our account? Is this a joke? I closed my office door before responding. Unfortunately, not. Prescott is restructuring, and the owner's daughter will be taking over your account. The owner's daughter? I've never even met her. We've worked with you for 3 years. Caroline's indignation was clear. Did something happen? Are you leaving the company? No. Just taking on different responsibilities. I chose my words carefully, aware that bad-mouthing the company would only make me look unprofessional. This is ridiculous. We chose Prescott because of you, not because of the company name. Her loyalty warmed me, but I knew how these situations played out. I appreciate that, Caroline. Zoe is very qualified, and I'm sure she'll take good care of Lockhart. After we hung up, I sat in my new smaller chair in my new smaller office, and allowed myself 5 minutes of pure unfiltered rage. I'd given this company everything, canceled vacations for client emergencies, worked through pneumonia to meet deadlines, sacrificed relationships because I was always just finishing something important at the office, and in return, I'd been replaced without warning by someone whose primary qualification was her last name. When my 5 minutes were up, I dried my eyes, reapplied my makeup and made a decision. I would not go quietly into professional obscurity. I wouldn't quit. That would only reinforce the idea that I couldn't handle setbacks. Instead, I would excel so dramatically with these unwanted accounts, that Victor would be forced to recognize his mistake. It was a solid plan, or at least it would have been if I'd had any idea what was about to happen next. The following morning, I arrived to find my new team waiting nervously outside my office. Unlike my previous team of ambitious, high-performing account executives, this group looked beaten down by years of managing difficult clients with minimal budgets. "Morning, everyone," I said, unlocking my door. "Let's get to know each other." For the next hour I listened as they outlined the challenges of the legacy portfolio. Clients who hadn't increased spending in years, creative that hadn't been refreshed in even longer, and minimal support from the agency's senior leadership. Basically, we're the island of misfit toys, explained Ryan, a formerly promising account manager who'd apparently been exiled to legacy accounts after a disagreement with Victor's brother, who ran the finance department. No one expects much from us, which is both liberating and depressing. Well, that changes today, I said, straightening the nameplate on my desk. Just because these clients don't spend millions, doesn't mean they don't deserve our best work. And just because we've been sidelined, doesn't mean we have to act like it. The team exchanged skeptical glances, but I ignored them and continued. I want a complete review of all 15 accounts by the end of the week, identify opportunities for growth, creative refreshes, anything that could inject some energy into these relationships. Victor won't approve additional creative resources for these accounts, warned Tasha, the most senior team member. We've tried before. Let me worry about that, I replied, already formulating a plan. For now, just focus on the opportunities. As they filed out, I turned to the mountain of account histories I needed to review. The legacy portfolio was even worse than I'd feared. Years of neglect had left these once valuable clients feeling like afterthoughts. Most were small to mid-sized businesses that had been with Prescott since the early days, but had been gradually deprioritized as bigger clients came along. One folder in particular caught my attention: Meridian Custom Furnishings. They'd been Prescott's first major client 20 years ago, a family-owned business that crafted high-end custom furniture. According to the file, they'd once spent nearly $1 million annually on marketing, but had reduced their budget to barely six figures in recent years. I dug deeper into their history, and discovered something interesting. Despite their reduced spending with the agency, Meridian's business was actually thriving. They'd expanded into 3 new markets, opened a flagship showroom in New York, and been featured in several luxury home magazines. Yet their Prescott campaigns remained stuck in the past: basic print ads and minimal digital presence. This was an opportunity hiding in plain sight. I spent the afternoon researching Meridian, exploring their outdated website and sparse social media, comparing their marketing to more digitally savvy competitors. By evening, I drafted a complete revitalization proposal, a strategy that would modernize their approach without abandoning the heritage that made them special. The next morning, I called Robert Meridian, the founder's son who now ran the company. "This is unexpected," he said, after I introduced myself. "We haven't heard from anyone at Prescott in months aside from invoices." "That's exactly why I'm calling," I replied. "I've recently taken over your account, and I believe we've been underserving Meridian. I'd like to change that with your permission." There was a pause. "The last 3 account managers promised the same thing, Miss Chen. Nothing changed." "I understand your skepticism, Mr. Meridian. That's why I'd like to show you what's possible, not just tell you about it. I've prepared a presentation specifically for Meridian. No recycled ideas, no generic strategies. Would you give me 30 minutes to share it with you?" Another pause. Longer this time. "You've done specific work for us already without being asked. I believe in demonstrating value first, then asking for trust." He chuckled. "Well, that's refreshingly different." "Fine, Miss Chen. You have 30 minutes tomorrow at 9 a.m. I hung up, heart racing with a familiar excitement I hadn't felt since being demoted. This was what I lived for, the challenge of turning a skeptical prospect into a believer. I spent that night finalizing my presentation, creating mock-ups of a refreshed Meridian website, social campaigns featuring their craftspeople, and video concepts showcasing their bespoke design process. It wasn't my most elaborate work, but it was thoughtful, tailored, and strategic. Everything the account had been missing. The next morning, I arrived at Meridian's Chicago showroom 15 minutes early, taking time to appreciate the stunning handcrafted pieces on display. The attention to detail was extraordinary. Dovetail joints so precise they were nearly invisible. Wood grain matched perfectly across surfaces. Finishes that highlighted rather than concealed the natural beauty of the materials. Robert Meridian met me in the showroom, a tall man in his 50s with calloused hands that spoke of someone who still worked with the materials despite his executive role. "You're admiring the Hanson dining set," he observed, following my gaze to an elegant walnut table and chairs. "The craftsmanship is exceptional," I replied honestly. "The way the grain flows continuously from the table to each chair, it tells a story of care and intention." He studied me with new interest. "Most agency people see furniture as props for their ads, not as objects with their own integrity. That's the problem with your current marketing," I said, seizing the opening. It treats your pieces as products, rather than as the art they clearly are. My 30 minutes turned into 2 hours as Robert called in his marketing manager and lead designer to hear my ideas. I showed them how digital storytelling could showcase their craftsmanship process, how targeted social campaigns could reach wealthy millennials, now investing in quality over quantity, and how their sustainability practices could become a cornerstone of their brand narrative. "This is what we've been trying to articulate for years," the marketing manager said, flipping through my presentation again. "You actually understand what makes Meridian different." Robert nodded slowly. "What would this cost, Miss Chen?" I named a figure 3 times their current spend, but still within reach for a company of their size. "But we'd phase it in gradually, proving the return on each investment before expanding." "And you would personally oversee this?" Robert asked. "Every aspect, I promised." "Then let's proceed." He extended his hand. "Meridian is back in the Prescott fold, or rather, in the Morgan Chen fold." I left the meeting elated. This was exactly the win I needed. Proof that the legacy accounts weren't dead ends, but opportunities that had simply been neglected. Back at the office, I submitted the expanded scope of work for Meridian to Victor's brother, Michael, in finance, expecting resistance. Within an hour, he appeared at my office door. "This is a 300% increase over their current retainer," he said without preamble. "Which they've approved in writing," I replied, handing him the signed agreement. "They're thrilled to be working with someone who understands their brand again." Michael frowned. "Legacy accounts don't get this kind of attention. We keep them on maintenance mode for a reason." "And what reason is that?" His expression suggested I'd asked something obvious. "Resource allocation. We focus on the major growth accounts and ignore the potential in existing relationships," I finished. "That seems short-sighted." "It's not your place to question established strategy," Michael said, his tone hardening. "I'll have to discuss this with Victor." "Please do," I replied calmly. "I think he'll be interested to hear that Meridian has increased their budget by $300,000 after a single meeting." Michael left without another word, but the confrontation had made one thing crystal clear. The Prescott family wasn't just reorganizing for the sake of Zoe's career. The legacy accounts were deliberately being kept small, possibly to justify their eventual elimination. My success with Meridian had just disrupted that plan. Over the next week I applied the same focused approach to 3 more accounts, securing modest increases from each. My team's energy was transforming as they saw what was possible with actual leadership and attention. Even Ryan, the most cynical member, had started coming to me with ideas for revitalizing his accounts. Meanwhile, office gossip provided updates on Zoe's progress with my former clients. The Lockhart presentation had apparently gone fine, though not spectacularly. The Hanson media pitch had been postponed twice, and the crucial Atwood presentation was scheduled for Friday, tomorrow. I was reviewing campaign analytics for one of my newly engaged clients when Elise appeared in my doorway, closing the door behind her. "You need to hear this," she said in a low voice. "Zoe completely gutted your Atwood presentation, ignored everything you told her about their conservative approach. She's going in with some radical digital-first strategy that their CMO is going to hate." I forced myself to shrug. "Not my circus, not my monkeys anymore. Morgan." Elise's voice was serious. "When this crashes and burns, and it will, Victor will be looking for someone to blame. 3 guesses who that'll be, and the first 2 don't count." A cold weight settled in my stomach. Of course. Zoe would never take responsibility for a failure. She'd claim I'd sabotaged her by providing misleading information about the client. What am I supposed to do? Victor made it clear. These weren't my accounts anymore. Elise perched on the edge of my desk. "Document everything. Every email where you provided guidance, every note from your client meetings, everything that shows you set her up for success, not failure." I nodded, already mentally cataloging the paper trail I'd need to protect myself. "And Morgan?" Elise added as she stood to leave. "The word around the creative department is that you're making waves with the legacy accounts. People are noticing. Keep it up." Friday arrived with a tense atmosphere permeating the office. The Atwood presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m., and Zoe had commandeered the main conference room since morning, running her team through rehearsals that could be heard through the glass walls, her voice growing progressively more stressed with each run-through. I deliberately stayed on my floor, focusing on my own work and trying not to think about the presentation I should have been giving. Around 1:30 my phone rang with an unfamiliar internal extension. "Morgan Chen," I answered. "Morgan, it's Janet. From reception. There's a James Atwood here asking for you. Says he's the CEO of Atwood Industries." I nearly dropped the phone. James Atwood is in our reception area asking for me. Yes. And he seems impatient. I'll be right there. I hurried upstairs, mind racing. Why would the notoriously private CEO of Atwood Industries, a man who rarely attended agency presentations, be here asking for me personally? James Atwood stood in reception, an imposing figure in his 60s with silver hair and the straight posture of a former military man. He turned as I approached. "Mr. Atwood," I said, extending my hand. "Morgan Chen. This is unexpected. Miss Chen." His handshake was firm. "I was told you'd be leading the presentation today. Instead, I find my team is meeting with someone I've never heard of." I chose my next words carefully. "There's been a recent reorganization. Zoe Prescott has taken over the Atwood account." "And why is that?" "Our CMO spoke highly of your understanding of our brand." "It was a leadership decision," I replied diplomatically. "Zoe is actually the owner's daughter and has just joined the executive team." Something shifted in James Atwood's expression. "I see. A family appointment rather than a merit-based one." Before I could respond, Victor rounded the corner with Zoe close behind, both looking alarmed to find the CEO in reception, rather than the conference room. "Mr. Atwood," Victor exclaimed, "we were expecting you in the presentation. Is everything all right?" "No, Mr. Prescott. It isn't," Atwood replied bluntly. "I specifically came today because I was told Morgan Chen would be presenting. I make time for people who understand our business, not for family appointments." The color drained from Victor's face. "There's been a misunderstanding. Zoe is exceptionally qualified to present a strategy for a company she's never engaged with." "I doubt that." Atwood turned to me. "Miss Chen, are you familiar with the presentation scheduled for today?" I felt 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me intently. "I developed the original strategy." "Yes. Though I believe Miss Prescott has made significant changes." "And do you still stand behind the original strategy you developed?" I met his gaze directly. "Completely." James Atwood nodded once. "Then, you'll present it now." Victor started to object, but Atwood cut him off with a raised hand. "Mr. Prescott, I respect your right to run your business as you see fit. I have the same right with mine. Either Morgan Chen presents or Atwood Industries will be seeking a new agency relationship effective immediately." The moment hung suspended in the reception area. Victor's shock, Zoe's barely concealed fury, and my own stunned surprise creating a tableau of corporate drama. Finally, Victor nodded stiffly. "Of course, Mr. Atwood, Morgan will present." He turned to me, professional smile firmly in place despite the tension in his jaw. "Morgan, perhaps you could use the small conference room to review the presentation materials before we begin?" I nodded, maintaining my composure despite the emotional whiplash. "Give me 15 minutes, Mr. Atwood." "Take 20, he replied. "I want your best work, not your rushed work." As I turned toward the conference room, I caught a glimpse of Elise watching from the creative department, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. This unexpected turning of tables was just the beginning of a transformation that would reshape not just my career, but the entire power structure of Prescott Media Solutions. In the small conference room, I quickly downloaded my original presentation from the cloud backup I'd wisely created. Scrolling through it confirmed my suspicions. Zoe had indeed gutted the strategy I'd carefully crafted based on months of relationship building with Atwood's team. Gone was the heritage-focused approach that respected their 75-year company history. In its place stood flashy digital concepts that might work for a tech startup but would alienate Atwood's traditional manufacturing clientele. I restored my original slides, adding only a few minor updates to reflect market changes from the past week. As I worked, the door opened, and Elise slipped in, closing it quietly behind her. "Need a second set of eyes?" she asked, already pulling up a chair. "Always," I replied, grateful for the support. Zoe completely rewrote the strategy. It would have been a disaster. Elise scanned through the presentation. Classic case of MBA syndrome. Thinking theoretical knowledge trumps actual client relationships. She pointed to a slide. "You should emphasize the ROI data here. James Atwood is famously numbers-driven." We spent the next 15 minutes refining the presentation with Elise offering insights from her previous interactions with Atwood executives. Her suggestions were subtle but valuable, highlighting certain data points, rearranging the flow for maximum impact, adding context that would resonate with the CEO specifically. "Victor's in panic mode," Elise informed me as we wrapped up. "I've never seen him this rattled." James Atwood almost never attends pitch meetings, and he certainly doesn't make demands about who presents. Why would he care who presents as long as the strategy is solid, I wondered. Elise gave me a knowing look. Because people like James Atwood didn't build empires by trusting institutions, they trust people. You obviously made an impression during your research phase. A light knock interrupted us, and Janet from reception appeared. They're ready for you in the main conference room. The walk down the hallway felt surreal. Just 3 days ago, I'd been exiled to the lower floor, written off as yesterday's news. Now I was walking back into the spotlight because a CEO had specifically requested me by name. The significance wasn't lost on anyone we passed. Whispers followed in our wake as staff members processed this unexpected development. The main conference room fell silent as I entered. Around the large table sat the Atwood team, their CMO Thomas Powell, whom I'd worked with extensively, their product director Anita Voss, and 3 other executives I recognized from my research. James Atwood sat at the center, his presence commanding attention despite his relaxed posture. On the Prescott side, Victor sat stiffly at the head of the table with Zoe beside him, her expression a masterful attempt at professional neutrality that couldn't quite hide her fury. The creative team looked confused by the last-minute presenter switch, shuffling through notes that now might not match my presentation. "Thank you for your patience," I said, connecting my laptop to the display system. "I'm Morgan Chen, Senior Account Director at Prescott Media." "We know who you are, Miss Chen," James Atwood replied with the hint of a smile. "That's why we're still here." I felt Zoe's glare like a physical force, but kept my focus on the presentation. For the next 45 minutes, I walked the Atwood team through my strategy. A careful balance of traditional and digital approaches that honored their company heritage, while positioning them for growth in evolving markets. I emphasized the craftsmanship that had made Atwood Industries a leader in precision manufacturing, drawing parallels to other heritage brands that had successfully modernized without losing their identity. Throughout, James Atwood remained engaged, asking pointed questions that I answered with confidence, born from thorough research. Thomas Powell nodded frequently, occasionally adding context that supported my recommendations. The energy in the room shifted perceptibly as the presentation progressed from initial tension to growing enthusiasm. "What I appreciate, James," Atwood said as I concluded, "is that you clearly understand what makes Atwood different. We're not trying to be the newest or trendiest manufacturer. We've succeeded for 3 generations by being the most reliable, the most precise, the most consistent." "Excellence isn't trendy," I replied. "It's timeless. Our strategy simply makes that excellence visible to both your existing clients and the next generation of engineers and purchasing managers who might not automatically look to a 75-year-old company for innovation." James Atwood turned to Victor. "Your agency gets it, or rather, Miss Chen gets it." He stood, signaling the meeting's end. "We'll proceed with Prescott Media as discussed, with Morgan Chen as our primary contact." Victor's smile remained fixed as he rose to shake Atwood's hand. "We're delighted to continue our relationship. I assure you that Morgan will receive all the resources needed to execute this strategy flawlessly." After the Atwood team departed, Victor immediately called for Elise, Zoe and me to join him in his office. The walk there was silent. Tension crackling between us like static electricity before a storm. Victor's office occupied the building's corner, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, a visual reminder of his position at the company's peak. He sat behind his massive desk, fingers steepled, studying each of us before speaking. "That," he finally said, "was both the most impressive presentation I've seen this year and the most embarrassing situation I've faced as CEO." No one responded. Elise remained professionally neutral, while Zoe stared at a point just above her father's head, jaw tight. James Atwood personally attending a pitch meeting and demanding a specific presenter. Victor shook his head. "In 25 years, I've never experienced anything like it." "Morgan, explain how you developed such a relationship with him without my knowledge." I chose my words carefully. I didn't have a prior relationship with James Atwood. During my research phase, I conducted extensive interviews with their executive team and toured their manufacturing facilities. I spoke with their clients and their engineers. I immersed myself in their company culture to understand what truly differentiated them, and apparently impressed Thomas Powell enough that he mentioned you to his CEO, Victor concluded. "I simply did my job thoroughly," I replied, maintaining professional modesty despite the vindication I felt. Victor nodded slowly, then turned to his daughter. "Zoe, why did you discard Morgan's original strategy given her obvious understanding of the client?" Zoe straightened defensively. The strategy was overly conservative. My professors at Wharton emphasized disruptive approaches for heritage companies to avoid market stagnation. And did these professors have actual experience with third-generation manufacturing CEOs in the Midwest? Victor asked, his tone suddenly sharp. Their academic research is theoretical, Victor interrupted. This business isn't built on theories. It's built on relationships and results. He sighed, looking suddenly tired. This situation requires recalibration. My heart pounded as I waited for his decision. Would he acknowledge the mistake and restore my accounts, or find some way to satisfy both the client's demands and his daughter's position? Effective immediately, Morgan will resume management of the Atwood account, Victor announced. She will also retain her current legacy portfolio. Not quite the full restoration I'd hoped for, but a significant victory nonetheless. Additionally, Victor continued, Morgan and Zoe will co-lead the pitch for Valencia Pharmaceuticals next month. My stomach dropped. Valencia was a potential game-changer, a multinational pharmaceutical company looking for a new agency after a decade with their previous partner. Every major agency in Chicago was competing for the business. Being forced to collaborate with Zoe, who clearly resented me and had already demonstrated her willingness to discard my work, would be a minefield. Co-led? Zoe's tone made the concept sound physically painful. Yes, Victor said firmly. Morgan has demonstrated exceptional client insight and relationship-building skills. You bring valuable strategic frameworks and fresh perspective. Together, you'll give us the best chance of winning Valencia. It was a diplomatic solution that pleased no one. I would keep Atwood but remain saddled with the legacy accounts while adding the pressure of a major pitch. Zoe would get the opportunity to work on Valencia, but would have to share the spotlight. Now, Victor concluded, I suggest you both find a way to make this work. Elise, your creative team will support both the Atwood execution and the Valencia pitch. Let's not waste any more time on internal politics when we have clients to serve. As we filed out of his office, Zoe brushed past me without a word, disappearing down the hallway toward her office. Elise and I exchanged glances. Well, she said quietly. That could have gone worse or better, I replied, equally low. CO leading with someone who just tried to erase my work isn't exactly a dream scenario. True. But you're back in the game. Elise smiled. And you've got something Zoe doesn't have, the respect of the staff who actually do the work. That counts for a lot in this business. Back at my lower floor office, I found my team gathered expectantly. News of the Atwood presentation having spread throughout the agency with remarkable speed. Is it true? Ryan asked as I approached. Did James Atwood really demand you as the presenter? It happened, I confirmed, unable to keep a small smile from my face. And you're keeping our accounts too? Tasha looked worried. They're not pulling you back upstairs completely? Her concern touched me. In just a short time, I'd managed to build genuine rapport with this previously demoralized team. I'm keeping both, I assured them. We'll continue the work we've started with the legacy portfolio. In fact, I have some ideas for Westbrook Manufacturing that I'd like your input on, Ryan. The relief on their faces was palpable. For perhaps the first time, these account managers felt valued, not just as caretakers of accounts no one else wanted, but as meaningful contributors to the agency's success. The afternoon passed in a blur of congratulatory emails and strategy sessions with my team. By 6, most of the staff had departed, leaving the office pleasantly quiet. I was reviewing the latest Meridian campaign metrics when Zoe appeared in my doorway. She'd changed from her presentation outfit into more casual attire, though casual. For Zoe still meant designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. We need to talk, she said, remaining in the threshold as if unwilling to fully enter my space. I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. Please. Zoe sat rigidly, examining my office with poorly disguised disdain. This is about Valencia. I figured as much. I want to establish ground rules for our collaboration. She said the word as if it tasted unpleasant. I've already developed a preliminary strategy based on my analysis of their market position. Of course, she had. Without any client conversations or detailed research, she'd already determined the approach. I'm happy to review it, I said neutrally, though I usually prefer to start with extensive client discovery before developing strategic recommendations. That's inefficient, Zoe countered. We can refine the strategy after initial meetings. The point is to go in with a strong point, a view. Or, we could go in with strong questions and actually listen to their needs, I suggested. In my experience, pharmaceutical executives respond better to partners who demonstrate understanding before prescribing solutions. Zoe's eyes narrowed slightly. Is that how you impressed Atwood? By asking questions rather than providing answers? By asking the right questions, which led to more effective answers, I clarified. Different industries have different expectations. Manufacturing executives value precision and reliability. Pharmaceutical leaders prioritize compliance and evidence-based approaches. I'm well aware of industry differences, Zoe said stiffly. My MBA concentration was in healthcare marketing. Then you know that pharmaceutical companies face unique regulatory constraints that shape their marketing decisions, I replied. Those constraints aren't theoretical. They're practical daily considerations for their marketing teams. For a moment, Zoe seemed ready to argue, but then something shifted in her expression. You've worked with pharma clients before? GSK and Bristol Myers Squibb before joining Prescott, I confirmed. I led digital compliance strategy for their consumer health divisions. This information clearly disrupted her assumptions. She'd been operating on the belief that her prestigious education gave her an advantage only to discover I had actual experience in the specific industry we were targeting. Why didn't you mention this to my father? She asked. He didn't ask. I replied simply. And until now, my pharmaceutical experience wasn't relevant to my accounts at Prescott. Zoe studied me with new calculation in her gaze. So you know the FDA marketing guidelines, the PAB code, the significant differences between consumer and professional pharmaceutical marketing? I do. She nodded slowly, seemingly coming to some internal decision. Then perhaps we should approach this differently. I'll share my preliminary strategy. You identify regulatory concerns, or client-specific considerations I might have missed. It wasn't quite the equal partnership Victor had envisioned, but it was progress from her previous dismissiveness. That's a start, I agreed. But we should also align on our approach to the initial client meetings. Valencia's RFP specifically mentions their interest in agencies that demonstrate collaborative culture and unified leadership. If we appear divided, we've lost before we've begun. Zoe frowned, clearly having missed this detail in the request for proposal. Fine. We'll present a unified front to the client. She stood, smoothing her impeccable jeans. I'll send you my deck tonight. We can meet tomorrow to discuss. I'll review it and provide feedback, I promised, choosing not to point out that Saturday morning work sessions hadn't been part of my plans. After Zoe left, I leaned back in my chair, processing the interaction. Her approach had shifted from outright hostility to reluctant acknowledgement of my value, at least in the specific context of pharmaceutical marketing. It wasn't friendship or even true respect, but it was a crack in her armor of entitlement. My phone buzzed with a text from Elise. Drink at Lola's? You've earned it, and I want details. Lola's was a small jazz bar tucked away on a side street near the office, upscale enough for privacy, but relaxed enough that you could actually hear conversations over the music. When I arrived, Elise had already secured a corner booth and ordered a bottle of champagne. This feels excessive, I said, sliding into the booth. Are you kidding? James Atwood, demanding you by name. Victor forced to backtrack on your demotion. Zoe knocked down a peg. If that doesn't deserve champagne, nothing does. She filled 2 glasses. To the power of doing your job exceptionally well. I clinked glasses with her, the celebration feeling both wonderful and slightly premature. It's a victory, but not a complete one. I'm still managing the legacy, accounts, and now co-leading Valencia with someone who clearly resents me. True, Elise acknowledged. But you've changed the narrative. A week ago, you were being sidelined into obscurity. Now you're the account director who impressed James Atwood enough that he personally intervened on your behalf. That story will follow you throughout your career in this industry. She had a point. Advertising was as much about narrative as anything else, and the story of my professional identity had just taken a dramatic turn for the better. Zoe came to see me after hours, I told her, describing the interaction. She's already developed a strategy for Valencia without any client input. Typical, Elise snorted. The Prescotts have always valued decisive action over thoughtful consideration. Victor built this agency by being first to market with new approaches, even when those approaches weren't fully baked. That works for some clients, but pharmaceuticals are different, I said. They operate in such a regulated environment that they're naturally conservative. Pushing too hard too fast just makes them nervous, which you know from experience, Elise noted. Experience that, I'm guessing, Zoe doesn't have despite her fancy MBA. She seems to have studied healthcare, marketing academically, I confirmed. But there's a world of difference between case studies and actually navigating FDA regulations with real clients and real consequences. So you have leverage, Elise concluded. Knowledge she needs but can't easily acquire before the pitch. I hadn't thought of it that way. But she was right. My practical experience gave me something valuable to contribute, something Zoe couldn't simply override or dismiss without potentially jeopardizing the pitch. The question is, Elise continued refilling our glasses, how do you use that leverage? Not just to win Valencia, but to secure your position long-term? It was the question I'd been avoiding. Winning the Valencia account would be a significant professional achievement, but it wouldn't resolve the underlying power dynamics at Prescott. Zoe was still the owner's daughter, still positioned for eventual leadership regardless of her qualifications. I need to make myself indispensable, I said, thinking aloud. Not just to clients, but to the agency's success. Exactly, Elise agreed. Client relationships are powerful, but they can be transient. You need structural leverage. Like the legacy accounts, I realized suddenly. Everyone's been treating them as deadweight, but I've already proven there's untapped potential there. If I can revitalize even half of them, you become the growth engine for an overlooked segment of the business, Elise finished. Very smart. And with the Atwood account back in my portfolio, plus potential Valencia success, I'd have demonstrated value across all client tiers. The strategy was taking shape in my mind. But I'd still need internal allies beyond just you and my team. Elise smiled mischievously. You might have more allies than you realize. Victor's brother, Michael, is furious about the Atwood situation. Furious at me? I asked, confused. At Victor, Elise clarified. He believes the strategic realignment that gave Zoe your accounts was hasty and ill-considered. He was against bringing her directly into leadership without proper agency experience. This was unexpected. Michael Prescott had always seemed fully aligned with his brother's decisions. Why would he share that with you? I asked skeptically. Because we dated briefly in the early days of the agency, Elise replied with a wink. Before I realized I preferred women. We've remained friends, and he still confides in me occasionally, especially when he's frustrated with Victor's decisions. The revelation shifted my understanding of the agency's power dynamics. If Michael Prescott was questioning his brother's leadership choices, there might be more instability in the executive suite than I'd realized. I'm not suggesting you try to exploit family tensions, Elise cautioned, reading my expression. Just be aware that the Prescott family isn't the monolithic force it appears to be. There are differences of opinion about the agency's future direction. As we finished the champagne, our conversation turned to practical next steps. How to approach the Valencia collaboration, how to continue building momentum with the legacy accounts, and how to navigate the complex politics of an agency in transition. Just be careful, Elise warned as we prepared to leave. Zoe may have been humbled today, but she's still a Prescott. And Prescotts don't forget perceived slights. I didn't create this situation, I pointed out. James Atwood did. Doesn't matter, Elise replied. In her mind, you've undermined her position and embarrassed her in front of her father. That makes you a threat to be neutralized. The warning followed me home, tempering my celebration with caution. I'd won a significant battle, but the larger conflict was just beginning. As I reviewed Zoe's Valencia strategy that night, predictably aggressive, innovative but tone-deaf to regulatory realities, I realized how precarious my position remained despite the day's victory. Saturday morning found me at a coffee shop near my apartment, preparing for my meeting with Zoe. I'd annotated her presentation with detailed notes about regulatory concerns, market-specific considerations, and client sensitivities based on my previous pharmaceutical experience. My approach was deliberately constructive rather than critical, highlighting opportunities to strengthen her strategy, rather than simply pointing out its flaws. Zoe arrived precisely on time, dressed in athleisure wear that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She ordered a complex coffee concoction before joining me at my table. "You've reviewed the deck?" she asked without preamble. "Thoroughly," I replied, pushing my annotated copy across the table. "You've developed a compelling market positioning. I've added some notes about regulatory considerations and client-specific factors based on my pharmaceutical experience." She flipped through the document, her expression neutral, but her body language gradually relaxing as she realized my feedback was substantive rather than competitive. "These FDA citation references are helpful," she acknowledged. "And your point, about their previous compliance issues with social media marketing, is well taken. Valencia was fined last year for influencer content that made implied claims without proper substantiation," I explained. "They're particularly sensitive about digital recommendations as a result." Zoe nodded, making her own notes. That explains their emphasis on compliance protocols in the RFP. She looked up. How do you know their CMO previously worked at Johnson & Johnson? That wasn't in the company materials. LinkedIn and industry news, I replied. I make it a practice to research the actual people making decisions, not just the company profiles. Maria DeSantis spent 15 years at J&J before joining Valencia, and she was known for prioritizing long-term brand building over short-term sales activation, which suggests she might resist our more aggressive growth recommendations, Zoe concluded, demonstrating quicker strategic thinking than I'd given her credit for. Not necessarily resist, but she'll want to see the balance between immediate results and sustainable brand equity, I clarified. J&J is famous for its patient-first marketing approach. That perspective doesn't disappear when executives change companies. For the next 2 hours, we worked through the presentation, finding unexpected common ground despite our different approaches. Zoe's academic training gave her a strong grasp of market analysis and competitive positioning, while my practical experience provided crucial context about industry-specific constraints and client expectations. We should request a tour of their research facilities as part of our discovery process, I suggested as we wrapped up. Pharmaceutical executives appreciate agencies that show interest in their science, not just their marketing challenges. Good point, Zoe agreed, making a note. We could also invite their regulatory affairs director to the initial meeting. Shows we understand the compliance team's role in their marketing decisions. I nodded, pleasantly surprised by her insight. Exactly. Breaking down the typical silos between marketing and regulatory demonstrates that we understand their unique challenges. As we gathered our materials, an awkward silence fell between us. We'd managed productive collaboration for 2 hours, but the underlying tension remained unresolved. Look, Zoe finally said, about the Atwood situation. It's business, I interrupted, wanting to avoid unnecessary drama. You didn't create the reorganization, and I didn't engineer James Atwood's intervention. We're both just navigating the situation as professionals. She studied me for a moment, seemingly weighing whether to accept this diplomatic framing. Fair enough, she finally said. For what it's worth, your original Atwood strategy was solid. I should have incorporated more of it rather than starting from scratch. The admission clearly cost her pride, making it all the more meaningful. Thank you, I replied simply. And your Valencia analysis is impressively thorough. With some refinement to address industry-specific nuances, it could be exactly what they're looking for. We parted with cautious professional respect, not friendship, not alliance, but perhaps the beginning of a workable collaboration. As I watched her slide into her luxury SUV, I wondered if this tentative truce would survive the pressures of the coming weeks. The Valencia pitch would test not just our strategic thinking, but our ability to present a unified front despite our complicated history. Monday morning brought unexpected developments. I arrived to find my team gathered around Tasha's computer. Expressions ranging from concern to outright alarm. What's happening? I asked, setting down my coffee. Westbrook Manufacturing just announced they're conducting an agency review, Ryan explained. All their marketing partnerships are being re-evaluated. Including us, Tasha added unnecessarily. Westbrook was one of my larger legacy accounts, a mid-size industrial equipment manufacturer that had been with Prescott for over a decade. They weren't a marquee client like Atwood, but they were stable, profitable, and politically significant, because their CEO played golf with Victor regularly. Let me see, I said, reviewing the announcement on Tasha's screen. The language was standard corporate communications, phrases like strategic reassessment, and ensuring alignment with future growth objectives that revealed little about the actual motivation. Have they reached out directly? I asked. Not yet, Ryan replied. This just hit the industry news an hour ago. I reached for my phone, scrolling through contacts until I found David Westbrook's number. The CEO had always been cordial during our limited interactions, though most of my contact had been with their marketing director. Mr. Westbrook's office answered a polished assistant's voice. Good morning. This is Morgan Chen from Prescott Media. I'm hoping to speak with Mr. Westbrook regarding this morning's announcement. I'm sorry, Miss Chen, but Mr. Westbrook is unavailable. I can connect you with Melissa Harper in marketing if you'd like. Melissa was their marketing director, a competent but cautious executive who rarely made significant decisions without extensive consultation. Yes, please, I replied, suspecting Melissa would have more insights anyway. After a brief hold, Melissa's voice came through, sounding slightly harried. Morgan, I was planning to call you today. I guess you've seen the announcement. Just now, I confirmed. I wanted to understand the situation directly from you. Is there something specific prompting the review? Melissa hesitated. It's complicated. The official line is that we're evaluating all vendor relationships as part of our 3-year planning process. And, unofficially? I pressed gently. Another pause. Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but James Atwood called David last week. They serve on a manufacturing industry board together. James mentioned that Prescott had undergone some recent staffing changes that initially concerned him, but that a Morgan Chen had ultimately impressed him enough to maintain the relationship. My heart raced. James Atwood had not only demanded me as his presenter, but had apparently discussed the situation with other industry leaders. David was surprised to hear about staffing changes affecting client accounts, Melissa continued, especially since we hadn't been notified about any transitions at Prescott. He started asking questions about our account team and, well, here we are. I see, I replied. Mind working rapidly? Melissa, I'd like to request a meeting with you and David as soon as possible to discuss how Prescott can continue supporting Westbrook's objectives. We're scheduling presentations with all potential agencies over the next 2 weeks, she explained. Janet from our office will send the RFP and meeting details today. After hanging up, I sat motionless, processing this development. What had begun as a personal professional setback was evolving into something with much broader implications. If James Atwood was discussing Prescott's internal reorganization with other industry leaders, the ripple effects could extend well beyond single accounts. I needed to inform Victor immediately, but first, I gathered my team. Listen up, everyone. This isn't just about Westbrook. We need to contact every client in our portfolio today, check in, reaffirm our commitment, and get ahead of any concerns before they become formal reviews. What exactly do we tell them? Ryan asked. We can't exactly say, sorry, you got dumped into the legacy account wasteland, but we still value your business. We tell them the truth, I replied. That Prescott is evolving its account structure to provide more specialized attention to established clients with growth potential. We emphasize the dedicated resources now focused on their business and the opportunities we've identified for expanding their marketing impact. The team nodded, energy visibly building as they absorbed this positive framing of our situation. Ryan, you take the manufacturing clients. Tasha, focus on retail. Luis, handle the service businesses. I'll take Westbrook personally, plus check in with Meridian since they've just increased their investment with us. As they dispersed to begin calls, I headed upstairs to Victor's office, knowing the Westbrook news would reach him soon if it hadn't already. His assistant tried to deflect me, but I insisted the matter was urgent. Victor was on the phone when I entered, his expression darkening as he saw me. He cut his call short. Morgan, I assume this is about Westbrook. You've heard, I noted. Taking a seat without waiting for invitation. Michael just informed me. He leaned back, eyes narrowed. Apparently James Atwood has been quite talkative about his experience with our agency. That's my understanding as well, I confirmed. Melissa Harper mentioned that he spoke with David Westbrook last week. Victor's jaw tightened. And now we're facing a review with a 10-year client who represents nearly $1 million in annual billing. It's manageable, I said calmly. I've already requested a meeting with David and Melissa. My team is contacting every client in our portfolio to get ahead of any similar concerns. Your team, Victor repeated. Emphasis on the possessive. The legacy accounts that were deliberately consolidated because they weren't growth priorities. Perhaps that classification needs reevaluation, I suggested. Meridian has already tripled their spending. Several others have shown similar potential with the right attention. Victor studied me. Calculation evident in his expression. You're suggesting the legacy portfolio is actually an untapped growth opportunity. I'm stating it as fact, I replied confidently. These clients were neglected, not inherently limited. With proper strategy and attention, many could significantly increase their marketing investment. The implications hung between us. If I was right, the organizational restructuring that had demoted me to make room for Zoe had actually been strategically flawed, potentially putting millions in reliable revenue at risk. And Westbrook specifically? Victor asked. Can you retain them? If I lead the pitch personally and demonstrate our renewed commitment to their business, yes. David Westbrook values relationships and stability. He's conducting this review because he felt blindsided by changes he learned about from an industry peer, not because he's genuinely dissatisfied with our work. Victor nodded slowly. Coming to a decision. You'll lead the Westbrook defense. Full resources, whatever you need, and continue your revitalization efforts with the other legacy accounts. It wasn't quite a vindication, but it was an acknowledgement that my approach had merit, and that the agency now needed my client relationships more than I needed their organizational validation. As I turned to leave, Victor added, "The Valencia pitch team meets tomorrow morning. I expect you and Zoe to present a unified strategy and approach." "We've already begun aligning our thinking," I assured him. "Despite our different perspectives, we're finding productive common ground." Back at my office, I found an email from Zoe requesting a meeting that afternoon to finalize our Valencia approach. Her tone was businesslike but not hostile, a continuation of our cautiously professional interaction from the weekend. The organizational turbulence was far from resolved, but the power dynamics had shifted perceptibly. What had begun as a simple case of nepotism had evolved into a complex realignment of agency priorities, client relationships, and internal alliances. And somehow, I'd found myself at the center of it all, not just fighting for my career, but potentially reshaping the future direction of Prescott Media Solutions. The Valencia pharmaceutical pitch became the unexpected catalyst for transformation at Prescott Media. After our initial strategy session, Zoe and I developed a rhythm of collaboration that surprised both of us. She brought academic rigor and bold conceptual thinking. I contributed industry knowledge and client insight. Together, we crafted an approach that honored Valencia's conservative heritage while pushing their marketing into thoughtfully progressive territory. "I still think the patient testimonial campaign should lead with emotional impact," Zoe argued during our final preparation session. We'd taken over Conference Room B, presentation slides, and research covering every available surface. "Emotion works," I agreed. "But pharmaceutical regulations require substantiation for every claim. If we lead with patient stories, Valencia's legal team will insist on so many disclaimers that the emotional impact gets buried." Zoe considered this, then suggested a compromise. "What if we structure it as a day-in-the-life content? Focus on how their medications improve daily functioning, rather than making specific claims about symptom relief." It was a smart solution that balanced emotional resonance with regulatory compliance, exactly the kind of thinking that would impress Valencia's marketing team, while reassuring their legal department. "That could work," I acknowledged. "If we emphasize functional improvements rather than medical outcomes, we stay within the boundaries while still connecting emotionally." These moments of productive collaboration had become more frequent as we prepared for the pitch. The initial resentment remained present, but had been channeled into a competitive creativity that elevated our work. We still disagreed often, sometimes intensely, but the disagreements now produced better ideas rather than simply creating friction. Meanwhile, my efforts with the legacy accounts were bearing fruit. After the Westbrook Review announcement, my team had mobilized impressively, reconnecting with every client and demonstrating renewed commitment to their business. 3 more accounts had increased their spending, and Meridian had referred us to a complementary business in their industry. The morning of the Valencia pitch arrived with unexpected calm. Zoe and I had rehearsed extensively, each understanding our role in the presentation. Victor would introduce the agency. Zoe would lead the strategic overview. I would handle the regulatory and implementation sections, and we would jointly present the creative concepts. "Ready?" Zoe asked as we gathered our materials in the reception area, waiting for the Valencia team to arrive. "As ready as anyone can be when $10 million in potential billing is on the line," I replied with a wry smile. 20, she corrected. If they consolidate all their consumer brands with one agency, the stakes were indeed enormous, not just financially but symbolically. Winning Valencia would cement Prescott's position as a player in pharmaceutical marketing, opening doors to an entire industry segment we'd previously only touched peripherally. Victor joined us, adjusting his tie nervously. "Everything prepared? Team aligned? Any last-minute issues?" "We're fully prepared," I assured him. "Zoe and I have developed a comprehensive approach that addresses both Valencia's growth objectives and their compliance requirements." The subtle shift in dynamics wasn't lost on Victor. I had placed Zoe's name before mine, a small acknowledgement of her contributions that served as both professional courtesy and strategic positioning. If the pitch succeeded, we would share credit. If it failed, we would share responsibility. The Valencia team arrived with formal precision. 6 executives, including their CMO, Maria DeSantis, their Regulatory Affairs Director, and surprisingly, their Chief Medical Officer. The presence of the CMO, unusual for an initial agency pitch, signaled how seriously they were taking this review. Introductions made, we moved to the main conference room where Elise and the creative team awaited. The presentation unfolded with well-rehearsed precision, each of us handling our sections flawlessly, while maintaining a unified narrative thread. Victor established Prescott's credentials. Zoe outlined our understanding of their market challenges, and I detailed our approach to navigating regulatory constraints while still delivering marketing impact. When we reached the creative concepts, Maria DeSantis leaned forward visibly, always a good sign. Our A Day in the Life patient campaign clearly resonated, as did our physician educat ion approach that elevated scientific substance over marketing. Flash. What impresses me, Maria noted during the Q&A, is that you've managed to be both innovative and compliant. Most agencies give us ideas our legal team immediately rejects or safe concepts that won't move the needle. We believe effectiveness and compliance aren't opposing forces, I replied. They're complementary requirements that, when properly integrated, create marketing that actually works in the healthcare environment. And how would you structure our account team? Ask their procurement director. Who specifically would lead our business? Victor stepped in smoothly. Valencia would be led jointly by Zoe and Morgan. Their complementary skills, Zoe's strategic vision, and Morgan's pharmaceutical expertise, would ensure you receive both innovative thinking and practical implementation. The description was diplomatic, positioning our CO leadership as intentional strength rather than temporary accommodation. More surprisingly, it seemed Victor now genuinely believed this framing. His earlier reluctance replaced by recognition of our effective partnership. After the Valencia team departed, promising a decision within 2 weeks, the pitch team remained in the conference room simultaneously exhausted and energized. That, Elise declared, was the most seamless pharmaceutical pitch I've seen in 20 years. They're going to choose us. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Victor cautioned, though his expression betrayed his optimism. Their procurement team still has significant influence, and we're competing against agencies with longer pharmaceutical track records. True, I acknowledged. But we demonstrated something unique today. The ability to balance innovation with compliance, creativity with regulation. That's rare in healthcare marketing. Zoe nodded in agreement. Her earlier competitiveness tempered by the shared accomplishment. We should prepare for the second-round discussions. They'll likely have follow-up questions about implementation timelines and team structure. Her use of we rather than I represented subtle but significant progress in our professional relationship. As the team dispersed, Victor asked Zoe and me to join him in his office. The potential Valencia win had clearly shifted his perspective. On our collaboration, his earlier skepticism replaced by cautious endorsement. Whatever happens with Valencia, he said once we were seated, you two have demonstrated effective partnership despite challenging circumstances. I'm considering how this model might apply to other major accounts. The implication was clear. Our forced collaboration had produced results that warranted replication, potentially creating a new leadership structure at the agency. The Westbrook defense is next week, Victor continued. Morgan, given your success in retaining Atwood and revitalizing the legacy accounts, I want you to lead that presentation. Zoe, I'd like you to contribute strategic input. Though Morgan will make final decisions given her relationship with the client. It was a remarkable reversal from his earlier positioning. Zoe would still be involved, but I would lead an arrangement that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. There's one more item we need to discuss, Victor added, his tone growing more serious. Michael has been analyzing our account distribution and revenue projections. The legacy portfolio you've been revitalizing, Morgan, now shows greater growth potential than several of our supposedly premium accounts. The validation was satisfying, confirming what I'd recognized from the beginning, that these clients weren't inherently limited, just underserved. In fact, Victor continued, if current trends continue, your legacy portfolio could generate more new revenue this year than our 3 largest accounts combined, simply because you've identified opportunities everyone else overlooked. Zoe shifted uncomfortably, sensing where this conversation was heading. This creates an organizational challenge, Victor admitted. Our current structure doesn't properly value or support these relationships. Michael is recommending we create a new division specifically focused on these growth opportunities, with dedicated creative resources and strategic support. A legacy growth division, I suggested. Immediately seeing the potential. Focused on maximizing value from established relationships, rather than just pursuing new business. Exactly, Victor confirmed. And we believe you should lead it, Morgan. As Executive Vice President of Client Growth. Executive Vice President, the title represented not just restoration, but promotion, a position on the executive leadership team with direct input into agency direction and strategy. And my role? Zoe asked, her tone carefully neutral despite the obvious implications for her position. You would continue leading our new business division, focusing on acquiring and developing relationships with new clients, Victor explained. Your strategic thinking and innovative approach are valuable assets for clients seeking fresh perspectives. It was a diplomatic solution that gave us both leadership positions, while acknowledging our different strengths. More importantly, it created a structure that could eventually succeed regardless of personalities based on business logic rather than family politics. This restructuring would take effect after the Westbrook presentation, assuming we retain their business. Victor concluded. I'd like you both to consider the implications and provide input before we finalize details. As we left Victor's office, Zoe and I found ourselves in the strange position of having achieved an outcome neither of us had initially sought. A collaborative relationship with defined boundaries and mutual respect, if not quite friendship. Executive Vice President, Zoe remarked as we walked toward our respective offices. Congratulations. It's well deserved. The acknowledgement offered without evident resentment surprised me. Thank you. The new business division suits your strengths perfectly. Valencia proves that. Assuming we win Valencia, she qualified. Though her expression suggested confidence rather than doubt. We will, I replied with matching certainty. Our approach addressed exactly what they're looking for. Innovation within constraints, creativity with compliance. We reached the elevator that would take Zoe to the executive floor while I returned to my lower-level office, an arrangement that would soon change with my promotion. Morgan, Zoe said as the elevator arrived. I underestimated you. I saw your client relationships as something I could simply inherit, not recognizing they were built on expertise and trust that can't be transferred through organizational charts. The admission clearly cost her pride, making it all the more meaningful. And I misjudged you, I replied honestly. I saw your position as purely nepotism, not recognizing the genuine strategic value you bring to clients like Valencia. We both made assumptions that limited our effectiveness. The elevator doors opened, but Zoe held them, not quite finished. For what it's worth, I didn't know about the reorganization before it happened. Dad presented it as already decided when he told me about the position. This revelation shifted my understanding of the initial situation. Zoe hadn't engineered my demotion. She'd simply accepted the opportunity presented as most ambitious professionals would. That actually makes sense, I acknowledged. Victor has always made unilateral decisions, then expected everyone to adapt without question. A management style I'm trying not to replicate, Zoe noted ruefully. Anyway, we should finalize the Westbrook strategy tomorrow. I have some thoughts on their industrial equipment marketing that might complement your approach. As Zoe ascended to the executive floor, I returned to my soon-to-be former office, reflecting on the remarkable evolution of our professional relationship. What had begun as adversarial competition had transformed into something more complex, and ultimately more valuable. A partnership based on complementary strengths rather than identical perspectives. My team was waiting expectantly, having heard rumors about the Valencia pitch and potential organizational changes. How did it go? Tasha asked immediately. Exceptionally well, I replied. And there are bigger changes coming that affect all of us. I explained the proposed restructuring, watching their expressions shift from curiosity to excitement as they realized the implications. Rather than remaining the overlooked department handling unwanted accounts, they would become the growth-focused division identifying and developing untapped potential. So we're not the island of misfit toys anymore, Ryan observed with cautious optimism. We never were, I corrected gently. We were the overlooked opportunities division. Now we're being recognized for the value we've already proven we can create. The Westbrook presentation the following week unfolded with similar success. David Westbrook, initially skeptical, responded enthusiastically to our renewed commitment and fresh strategic approach. Zoe's contributions complemented my established relationship with their team, creating the perfect balance of familiarity and innovation. I'll be honest, David said as we concluded. We initiated this review because we heard concerning things about Prescott's account management. But today's presentation demonstrated exactly what we're looking for. Strategic thinking combined with deep understanding of our business. Westbrook decided to remain with Prescott without even completing their planned review of other agencies. The decision arrived via email the very next day, representing not just retained business but a powerful vote of confidence in our new approach. 2 days later, Valencia selected Prescott as their agency partner, citing our unique ability to navigate regulatory complexities while delivering breakthrough creative concepts. The initial contract covered their consumer brands with explicit potential to expand to their professional marketing, representing exactly the growth opportunities Zoe had identified. The agency announcement of our new structure came the following Monday. Victor gathered the entire staff in the main conference area, Michael standing supportively at his side. Prescott Media Solutions is evolving, Victor began. For 25 years, we've built our reputation on creative excellence and client service. Today, we're announcing organizational changes that will enhance our ability to deliver both. He outlined the new structure: my client growth division focusing on maximizing existing relationships, Zoe's new business division pursuing strategics, acquisitions, and Elise's expanded creative department, supporting both with dedicated teams. This structure recognizes a fundamental truth about our business, Victor continued. Growth comes not just from new clients, but from identifying untapped potential in existing relationships. Morgan Chen's leadership in revitalizing our legacy portfolio demonstrated this principle conclusively. As Victor introduced me as Executive Vice President, the spontaneous applause from my team spread throughout the room. Even Zoe joined in, her earlier resentment replaced by professional respect. The transition wasn't seamless, of course. Some staff remained skeptical about the restructuring, viewing it as merely repackaging existing divisions. A few of Zoe's supporters saw my promotion as undermining her authority rather than creating complementary leadership. But the results quickly silenced most critics. Within 6 months, my division had increased revenue from existing clients by 47%. While Zoe's team secured 3 new accounts in addition to Valencia, the agency's overall growth accelerated, creating new opportunities for staff at all levels. More subtly, the culture began to shift. The previous emphasis on pursuit of new prestigious clients was balanced by recognition of the value in nurturing established relationships. Account managers previously overlooked for promotion because they maintained boring accounts rather than landing flashy new business, found their consistent client service newly valued and rewarded. 1 year after Victor walked into my office with Zoe beside him, announcing my effective demotion, we gathered in that same main conference room for Prescott's annual all-staff meeting. The difference was palpable, not just in my position on the executive team, but in the energy throughout the agency. Our performance this past year has exceeded all projections, Victor announced proudly. Revenue is up 32%. Staff retention has improved by 24%, and client satisfaction scores are at their highest level in our history. He acknowledged each division's contributions, highlighting specific achievements and outstanding performers. When he reached the client growth division, his praise was unequivocal. Morgan Chen's leadership has transformed how we view existing client relationships, he stated. By identifying growth opportunities others overlooked, her team has generated over $12 million in incremental revenue, while strengthening some of our longest-standing client partnerships. The professional vindication was deeply satisfying, but even more meaningful was the change in how we operated as an organization. The arbitrary distinction between prestigious and legacy accounts had dissolved, replaced by recognition that every client represented potential value when properly served. After the meeting, James Atwood called me directly, something that had become a regular occurrence as our partnership deepened. "Morgan, I'm hearing impressive things about Prescott's performance," he said without preamble. "The restructuring you implemented seems to be working exceptionally well." I smiled at his assumption that I had implemented the changes rather than simply catalyzed them through circumstance. "It's been a team effort," I replied diplomatically. "The new structure better recognizes and rewards the various ways we create value for clients." "Value recognition is rare in agencies," James observed. "Most chase novelty at the expense of substance. That's why we've decided to consolidate all our marketing with Prescott, including our international divisions." The expansion would nearly double the size of the Atwood account, making it one of our largest global relationships. More importantly, it represented absolute validation of our approach, focusing on client needs rather than agency convenience. Later that afternoon, I encountered Zoe in the kitchen area, both of us taking rare breaks between meetings. "Heard about Atwood's expansion," she remarked, preparing an elaborate espresso drink. "Congratulations. That's significant growth from your division." "Thanks," I replied. "Valencia's European launch is progressing well too. Your team's regulatory navigation has been impressive." We'd settled into a relationship of professional respect with occasional moments of genuine collaboration. Not friendship exactly, but a productive partnership built on recognition of complementary strengths. "You know," Zoe said, considering her coffee thoughtfully, "a year ago, I would have resented your success, seen it as diminishing my position somehow. And now," I prompted when she paused. "Now I see that your success actually enhances mine," she admitted. "The stronger each division becomes, the more resources we all have for growth. It's not zero-sum. It was perhaps the most significant transformation of all." Recognition that individual advancement didn't require others' demotion. That collective success created more opportunity than internal competition. As I returned to my office, now appropriately located on the executive floor with a view rivaling Victor's, I reflected on the journey from that initial devastating demotion to my current position. The path had been neither direct nor easy, requiring strategic patience, principle-based decisions, and even uncomfortable collaboration with someone who had initially benefited from my setback. The lesson wasn't simply about perseverance or proving my value, though both had been necessary. It was about recognizing that organizational systems can change when their flaws become visible, that relationship capital often outweighs positional authority, and that sometimes the very person who seems to represent your professional obstacle can become an unlikely ally in transforming the environments that limited you both. My assistant interrupted these reflections with a reminder about my next meeting. The monthly review with Meridian Custom Furnishings. The first legacy client whose potential I'd recognized during those challenging early days of demotion. Robert. Meridian greeted me warmly as I entered the conference room. His craftsmanship-trained eye immediately noticing my recent promotion to the corner office. Moving up in the world, Morgan. Though I hope not too far up to remember the clients who helped you get there. Never, I assured him with genuine appreciation. Some relationships have value beyond their immediate numbers. They reveal possibilities you might otherwise miss. It was true not just of client relationships, but of professional ones as well. Even those that begin with replacement and resentment can eventually reveal unexpected growth opportunities when approached with strategic patience and principled persistence. Up next, thanks for watching. Take care, good luck.
After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. *.